Truth be told, I'm not a big fan of polls. Now, many of you might be here because I did an analysis of a poll, and that's why you're subscribed or have been watching. But with the exception of the crosstabs, which can give us real information about how the electorate is thinking, which ways they're going, which ways are being pulled one way or the other, which I think is really, really important. The horse race number at the top, Harris-Trump, those essentially mean nothing because as you notice in these polls, that number just keeps on going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's basically kind of useless. And then when you have larger margin of errors, they're bad as well. So I am not, even though I'm looking at them, I am not a big fan of polls. What I am a big fan of, however, are actual, real, raw votes. And now we're finally coming to the point that we are starting to see actual real numbers come in from some very important states as well. And in today's video, we are going to be talking about a lot of these early vote numbers. Now, if we look at early in-person voting, these states here have that going on right now, with Illinois just today opening up early in-person voting here in my state. I might actually go vote later today. I'm still not sure, but I do now have the time to do that. Now, these states are the states that actually have ballots being sent out. Now, the most important state that we have now added today is the state of Florida. So Florida has been sending out overseas ballots, but the domestic ballots, the ones that are going to be mailed inside of Florida, will be mailed out at the earliest today, but it could be up to a few more days from now. So some counties will mail theirs out now. Other counties will mail theirs out maybe in a week from now. So they have between 33 and 40 days to mail them out. But most of the big counties are probably getting those ballots out right now, which means probably in 3-4 days, we might see the numbers in Florida as far as ballots submitted increase exponentially. And we're going to be going over those numbers of the overseas ones that have come in so far. So in this video, we're going to be talking about not polls. We are going to be talking about early vote. Now, the one caveat that I want you to remember through all of these numbers right now in this video, but this is going to change maybe even a week from now, we are talking about very, very, very small numbers. And I don't want you to, look at these too much due to the fact that these numbers will change because more people will vote. But it does give us an idea of maybe where things are heading initially. And also, I'm going to be introducing my projection models for Florida, North Carolina, and Wisconsin. Now, these are brand new models. I'm going to be explaining them a little bit more in detail in another video, but my Florida model that I've had that has been a very successful model, actually the most successful model for Florida, I've made a tweak to it to be more accurate on the county level. I don't know if that's going to throw it off. It could. We'll see what happens. The Wisconsin model is totally new, and the North Carolina model, based off the Florida model, is also totally new off of that criteria I had for the new Florida model. The Florida model that I had previously, I'm not doing the selection cycle, but I might rerun it at the end of the election because it just requires the gathering of too much data and can take too much time to do. So with that being the case, let's go ahead and go over to the state of Virginia. So the first state we're going to look at is Virginia. Now, the county I want to look at most, because this is the one that is the most interesting, is Fairfax County. Now, Fairfax County is the biggest Democratic county as far as votes. This is where the Democrats will pull out the largest vote lead in the entire state of Virginia. So this is very important. And if we look at the early voting numbers right now in Fairfax County, we see 11,573 people have submitted their ballot. That is 299% more than this time in 2020, where remember, the 2020 election, because of COVID, we had so many ways that you could submit your ballot early. The fact that we are that much higher this early on, just a few days into early voting, shows me, or at least gives me a little bit of an indication that maybe the early momentum is on the Democratic side. To see these numbers is pretty amazing. Now, if we go over and look at Loudoun County, we can see that there is a 33% increase in the numbers coming there. Much, much smaller than we see from Fairfax, but we do see that increase. Now, there are other counties, both Democratic and Republican counties, that are seeing increases in the vote, but that Fairfax one is one that is very particular because, again, we're talking about raw votes. And to see those raw votes being increased by that much this early on in a county where the Democrats dominate, get 70% of the vote, that is a very, very good sign for Democrats. And so far, the early voting numbers coming out of Virginia are just absolutely good for the Democrats. Again, very, very small amount of data that we have, but we'll be keeping an eye on this to make sure that these trends continue for the Democrats. All right, so the next ones we're going to look at are North Carolina. Now, we should have a lot more numbers this point in the election in North Carolina, but due to the fact that RFK went through all of that hassle to get his name off the ballot, the ballots were delayed getting mailed out. So now we should start seeing the numbers increase more and more. Right now, we only have a little bit over 1,000 votes in the state. So again, caveat, we're talking about a very, very small amount of the actual votes being cast eventually when it comes to election day. But let's go ahead and see what the breakdown is right now. And as you can see in North Carolina, of the votes that have been submitted, 0.01% turnout, we see Democrats have 46.5% of those that have submitted their ballots. The Republicans are only at 14%, whereas unaffiliated voters are at 39.5%. Now, those numbers, again, very, very early on, we can't glean anything from these. The Democrats do have a voter registration advantage in the state, so at the end, we could see Democrats doing well. The thing that I find interesting with these very, very early numbers, and it's not just here, we'll see it in Florida as well, are these high unaffiliated numbers. And with these high unaffiliated numbers coming out at times where high Democratic numbers are coming out, it gives maybe somebody the sense that the voters who are maybe nonpartisan are going to shift to the Democratic side. Now, if we look at the 2020 election and we look at the percentage of unaffiliated voters in counties compared to the vote that Biden got in there, we see that there's just no relationship whatsoever. So we can't look at previous elections and say, oh, if a county is going to be more unaffiliated, therefore it's going to trend more Democratic. We do see that in places like Arizona, for example, and Nevada. We just don't see that here in North Carolina. And southern states are more likely to have less people who are unaffiliated. However, with the transient population coming into states like Georgia, Florida, and North Carolina, you are starting to see non-party affiliates go up as the people who are coming into that state aren't as familiar with the political system there as they are maybe in their home state where they came from. So therefore, a lot of them just register as unaffiliated voters. But these early numbers, very, very, very early numbers, look good for Democrats, especially if these votes that we see of the NPAs, the unaffiliated voters, might go Democratic. Now, in the case of Florida, like I said, we only have overseas ballots coming in, which overseas ballots usually tend to favor Republicans more because the overseas ballots that go out are usually targeted towards two people. One, people who are, pretty rich and they are overseas right now living somewhere else. And that's why they're getting the ballot because they're actually living somewhere else overseas. Or two, military ballots. And a lot of the military ballots in Florida are either going to be Navy or primarily Air Force, and they're going to go more conservative. So this is something, in fact, a lot of the votes that have already come in Florida is in Okaloosa County, which has a very, very large military population compared to all the other counties in the state. So if we look at the Florida results so far of the ballots that have been submitted, we can see that 40.4% of those are Democrats, 36.4% are Republicans, and 23.1% are independents, non-party affiliates, or other minor parties. Now, overall, this is a good number for Democrats, again, because these are solely overseas ballots that tend to trend way more Republican. If you ever watched a video or the movie Recount that was done by HBO about the 2000 election, watch that and see how the military ballots skewed very, very much to the Republican side. It's still the same way today. The thing in this number, though, that again is very interesting is this high number of unaffiliated voters, NPAs, non-party affiliate voters that are voting. I would expect at this time that this number would be around 17 to 19%, not cracking 20, but it has. It's cracked 20, and it's cracked it quite significantly. Again, if we look at the trend, this looks very, very good for Democrats. And now that the actual domestic ballots are going out today in many counties, hopefully we'll start seeing these numbers in Florida go up exponentially, and we can glean a little bit more information from the ballots that are being submitted. So the next thing I want to talk about is what I kind of really do, which is creating predictive models of elections. I mostly have worked in Florida, and my Florida model has been the most accurate Florida model of any model out there. I'll go ahead and link down the 2018, 20, and 22 elections. I have to find the 16 model, but the 2018 election was the closest election since the 2000 election in Florida at the presidential level, and my model was basically spot on with those. So you can go ahead and look at those, and it also tries to look at each of the county results as well to try to figure that out. So I work a lot on predictive models, and I've already created a model for Florida, North Carolina, and Wisconsin. And we're going to look at those very, 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 very preliminary results. Take these with a huge grain of salt because we can't glean anything, but I just want to show you the numbers because they're just kind of interesting. But I will be explaining those in another video that I will have. Keep tuned to watch that video, but I have made some changes to my models a little bit, so I'm a little bit worried about the accuracy this time, but I will be replicating the Florida model after the election that I used before. The only reason I'm not doing it this time is that it requires a lot more data. But let's look at the North Carolina model first, and you're going to see why I'm like, there is this big caveat that it's early. It's showing that Kamala Harris would win 92% of the vote to 8% of the vote, which obviously is not the case. Now, what is important here, and I put this in the note down below, and you need to remember this with every single model that is being done, this is only a projection based on the votes that have been submitted now. So this is basically saying if we stop the election now and we only count the ballots that have been submitted now, this is going to be the result. Now, this seems like a very high number, and yes, it does. But if you go back to when we were talking about that Republicans were only 14% of those who have submitted their ballots, we can see why this might be the case. So as the numbers change, these numbers will change drastically. So just remember, this is if we counted the ballots, a projection of if we counted the ballots that have been submitted to this point. All right, let's go ahead and go to the next state. So as we look at Florida right now, we can see 52 to 48 with only a 0.01% turnout. So yes, this is very, very small, and this number will change quite drastically over the coming week, week and a half as we get a lot more votes in. Now, another thing I want to mention in this model, and I should have mentioned it earlier, is that this only looks at major party votes. So it does not account for people who vote third party. In all my models that I've done in the past, that has not been an issue in trying to determine a winner. So therefore, we're sticking with that in this one. Now let's go ahead and go over to Wisconsin. All right, so looking at the Wisconsin model, it is a little bit different because the other two models are based off of voter registration by party and the turnout of those parties, which in Wisconsin, people don't register by party. So therefore, in this case, we can only look at total registered voters in the county. And with that being the case, we have to really look at previous election results. So the other two models are not based off of previous election results. It's based off the concept of voter registration and how likely those voters are going to be voting for the party that they're registered with, and then looking at the nonpartisan affiliate voters and determining from the partisan numbers how they're going to vote. I know it's really convoluted. Now, when it comes to the Wisconsin one, we can't do that. So we just have to take the electoral history. In this case, I looked at 2016 to 2022, see how each county does, and then figure out how those counties are going to perform based on that past experience. So unlike the other polls, or the other predictive models, which give you like one number, in this model, we're going to give you a range with a confidence interval of 95%. So it's basically taking two standard deviations of the average over the last 4 elections for president and governor. So here are the results of the Wisconsin model. So as you can see right now, according to our model, the worst that Kamala Harris will do as of the votes that are in right now. Now, we do have a few more votes in the state of Wisconsin. We're now at 0.2. We're getting close to that 1%. We see the worst that Kamala Harris would do would be, as of right now with the ballot submitted, 49.9%. The best she will do is 55.7%. Now with Donald Trump, the worst he would do as of the ballot submitted at this point is 44.3%, and the best he would do is 50.1%. So you can see of the ballots that have been submitted right now, Kamala Harris is doing quite well. Now, when it comes to the North Carolina and Wisconsin model, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do stuff beyond vote by mail. Hopefully, I'll be able to get statistics when they do early voting and election day voting, possibly. I know in Florida, that is going to be possible. So the Florida model that will be released at 7 p.m. Eastern time on election day, well, technically maybe 8 p.m. Eastern time because you have the panhandle. That is going to be a pure model looking at all the votes that have been submitted in Florida, and will give a projection of how that's going to be. I don't know what kind of data is going to be available for Wisconsin and North Carolina. I think I said Pennsylvania and North Carolina. We'll go ahead and see how that works. All right, so thank you all very much. I will be talking about polls, but to me, it's just like, one poll is like, Trump's up by 2, Harris up by 2, Trump's up by 2, Harris is up by 2. I haven't seen any real good polls, and also the sample sizes have been really low, with margin of errors really high, and I just think we can't glean anything from those. So I will be having a video soon about Georgia and how Georgia can be won by the Democrats, so stay tuned for that. Have a wonderful day wherever it is you are, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.